I exposed my wife's affair with my cousin, destroyed their scheme, and stripped her of all after she bragged she'd take half my fortune. My name is Gabriel, and I'm 54 now. But this story starts nearly 5 years ago. I was 49, successful, confident, and, if I'm being honest, a little restless. My life was stable, the kind of stability most people crave but rarely achieve. I had wealth, respect, and the freedom to do as I pleased. I have 2 kids, Sophie and Ethan, from my wife, who passed away suddenly in my late 30s. I dedicated my life to my kids, but after they grew up and built their lives, I didn't have someone to share my life with after my wife passed away. That absence felt sharper as the years went on. I wasn't entirely alone, though. My cousin Marco, 39, male, had always been there for me, almost like the brother I never had. We grew up together, inseparable as kids, and over the years he became a trusted part of my inner circle. Marco wasn't just family, he was someone I could lean on, someone I thought I could always trust. Although he was a master of charm, he was a disaster in execution, jumping from one failed venture to the next, a boutique that folded, an app that vanished. We always laughed about it. April, then I met Christina. It was at a charity gala in the heart of Manhattan, one of those events where everyone was there to rub elbows and prove they belonged. I wasn't expecting anything beyond another night of polite conversation and calculated networking. But then she walked in. Christina was radiant. At just 24, she had this effortless charm that drew everyone's attention. Her laughter filled the room like music, and her smile could stop time. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. I couldn't take my eyes off her. When I finally mustered the courage to approach her, I felt like a teenager again, nervous and unsure of myself. "Gabriel," I said, extending my hand, trying to hide the fact that my heart was pounding. "Christina," she replied, her voice light, her handshake firm. There was something in her eyes, a spark that made me feel like I was the only man in the room. We spent the rest of the evening talking. It didn't matter that she was younger than me, or that we came from completely different worlds. In those few hours, it felt like we'd known each other forever. She told me about her dreams, her love for travel, and her hunger to experience everything life had to offer. I was captivated. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed. Christina had this ability to make the mundane extraordinary. A simple dinner felt like an adventure. A quiet evening at home felt like a scene out of a romance novel. She made me laugh, she challenged me, and for the first time in years I felt alive. Brofrer, I introduced her to my world, and she embraced it eagerly. Christina loved the finer things, luxury cars, private jets, and 5-star hotels. But it didn't feel superficial at the time. She made me believe she loved me, not just the life I could provide. Looking back, I wonder if that was the first lie I told myself. Over the months, she also met everyone important to me, including Marco. He was his usual charismatic self, charming her with his easy jokes and warm demeanor. Christina fit in with my family effortlessly, or so I thought at the time. I remember feeling a deep sense of pride watching her laugh at Marco's stories, like the 2 most important people in my life were forming a bond of their own. Speaking of Marco, since Christina entered my life, he was pushing his latest project, a nebulous tech startup he claimed would revolutionize data security. He talked about it incessantly at family gatherings, peppering his pitch with buzzwords like disruption and synergy, but never offering a clear explanation of what the business actually did. His persistence, however, began to wear me down. I'd spent years dodging his pitches, but when Christina started championing his ideas as well, I began to reconsider. "You should really think about it," Christina said one evening, her enthusiasm infectious. "Marco's on the verge of something big. He just needs someone to believe in him." Her words planted a seed of doubt in me. I didn't trust Marco's track record, but I trusted Christina. I wanted to support him, to give him the chance he kept asking for. She was my good influence. She made me love her more through these kind moves to strengthen my connections with my loved ones. It wasn't long before I proposed. I spared no expense, a candlelit dinner on a yacht in the Mediterranean, a custom-designed diamond ring, and a string quartet playing her favorite song. When she said yes, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding was a grand affair held in the gardens of our estate in the Hamptons. Every detail was perfect, from the flowers imported from Holland to the celebrity chef who prepared the menu. As Christina walked down the aisle, a vision in white, I thought to myself, this is it. This is my forever. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We traveled the world, spent lazy weekends in our penthouse overlooking Central Park, and hosted extravagant parties that were the talk of the town. Christina had everything she could ever want, and I made sure of it. But even then there were signs, small, almost imperceptible cracks in the facade. She'd occasionally make comments about wanting more excitement or joke that I was too predictable. I laughed it off, chalking it up to her playful nature. After all, I was giving her the world. What more could she want? I didn't realize it then, but those cracks were the first warnings of what was to come. And I, blinded by love and trust, ignored them all. Hebrew. It's funny how love can make you blind. It makes you see what you want to see, hear what you want to hear, and believe what you want to believe. For those first few years, I believed with all my heart that Christina loved me as much as I loved her. But love, as I would later learn, is not always enough. Sometimes, no matter how much you give, it will never be enough for the person who doesn't know how to appreciate it. And Christina, as I would come to discover, was that person. The cracks in our perfect life were only the beginning. What came next shattered everything I thought I knew about her, about love, and about myself. But at the start, all I saw was the beauty, the joy, and the promise of a lifetime of happiness. Christina was my everything. I just didn't know how much that everything would cost. After our grand wedding, Christina and I settled into what I thought was a perfect life. I worked tirelessly to ensure we had everything we could ever want. Money wasn't just a tool, it was my love language, my way of showing her that she mattered more than anything. And Christina thrived in the world I'd built for her. Our penthouse in Manhattan became her playground. It overlooked Central Park, a view she adored. She'd stand by the window, gazing at the city lights, and say, "Gabriel, you've given me a dream." It felt good to hear that, like my hard work was validated. I wanted her to be happy, and every time I saw her smile, it felt worth it. Ibra Christina quickly grew into the role of a socialite. She became the centerpiece of every party we hosted, the woman everyone admired and envied. My world became hers, and I was happy to let her take the spotlight. We traveled endlessly. Weekends in the Hamptons, summers on the French Riviera, winters in Aspen. Her favorite destination was La Romana in the Dominican Republic. She loved the exclusivity, the private villas, the turquoise waters. For years, it felt like we were living a fairy tale. But even fairy tales have shadows. Abruer. The first signs of trouble were subtle, almost too small to notice. Christina had always been outgoing, but over time, her nights out became more frequent. At first, it was with friends from the charity circles, people I knew and trusted, but gradually new names began to pop up. "Just some friends I met at the gallery," she'd say casually, brushing it off. I didn't think much of it. Christina was young, and I wanted her to feel free, not trapped by the age gap between us. But then she started coming home later and later. Her excuses grew flimsier. "It was just such a great night. You wouldn't have enjoyed anyway," she'd laugh. I started feeling a gnawing doubt in the back of my mind. Was this normal? Was I being paranoid? I chalked it up to my insecurities about our age difference. I told myself that Christina was just enjoying her youth, that I had no reason not to trust her. One night, I walked past the study and heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but the words I caught were sharp enough to cut through me. "He's great for stability," she said, followed by a soft laugh. "But he's so boring. I mean, he's Gabriel. What was I supposed to do? Say no to a man with that kind of money?" I stood frozen, unable to move or breathe. Was she talking about me? She had to be. I wanted to storm in, demand an explanation, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move, and my mind was racing too fast to form a coherent thought. I quietly stepped away, pretending I hadn't heard anything, but her words replayed in my head all night. Stability. Boring. My name spoken like an obligation rather than a treasure. I bruja. The next morning I tried to act normal, but something had shifted. I watched her more closely, noticing things I'd ignored before, the way she glanced at her phone constantly, the sudden bursts of laughter at texts she refused to share, the new friends who always seemed to be younger, more vibrant, and not part of our usual circle. I wasn't about to jump to conclusions without solid evidence. I needed hard facts to back up what my intuition was already screaming. No way was I going in blind. One night, I mentioned to Marco that Christina had been acting distant. He waved it off with a laugh. "She's young, Gabe. Probably just needs a little excitement. Don't read too much into it." His words reassured me, and for a while, I convinced myself he was right. However, it wasn't long before the proof began to appear. One evening, while Christina was in the shower, her phone lit up with a message, and I wasn't going to miss an opportunity like that to assure myself. The message was from someone named Elle. It read, "Can't wait to see you again. Love you." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a friend. Friends don't send messages like that. Ibra Christina came out of the shower, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I started piecing things together, the late nights, the cryptic phone calls, the way she'd been pulling away from me emotionally. It all pointed to one thing. Christina wasn't being faithful. Abro. Another clue came during a family dinner at my cousin Marco's house. Christina had always been friendly with my family, but that night, her laughter with Marco felt different, too familiar, too intimate. I noticed the lingering glances, the inside jokes I wasn't a part of. There was a moment when all of us came inside the house. They stayed outside for a while, saying they were coming soon. Once I noticed her absence, I went to check on her. There she was, standing too close to Marco, smiling with shyness, and he was getting closer. I immediately called out to her with a steady and firm voice. I almost ruined the whole night, but I was too wise to act childish. I had my own other ways. Obviously, it didn't take long for me to notice that there was something between them. Any awake man would notice. The betrayal wasn't just with strangers. It was with someone I trusted, someone who shared my blood, my cousin. The realization left me breathless and furious. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about betrayal on a level I hadn't imagined. But still, I said nothing. I needed time to process, to figure out my next move. This situation required precision. I had spent years building a life of stability and control, and now everything felt like it was spiraling out of my hands. The cracks in our life of luxury had widened into fissures, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. But if Christina thought she could get away with this, she underestimated me. After that dinner at Marco's, the pieces of Christina's betrayal began to form a picture I could no longer ignore. The woman I had given everything to, the love of my life, my partner, had been lying to me. And the lies weren't just small ones, they were deep, calculated, and cruel. For days, I lived in a haze, alternating between heartbreak and rage. My mind replayed every suspicious moment, every strange look she exchanged with Marco, and every late night she couldn't explain. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted more evidence. Maybe it wasn't Marco. Christina's phone became a goldmine of damning proof. Late one night, while she was asleep, I finally worked up the courage to unlock it. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, but what I found made my stomach churn. There were texts from Marco L. I knew it was him. She mentioned his name in one of their conversations. Explicit, vulgar messages that left no room for doubt. They joked about their stolen moments, their plans to meet up while I was working late. It felt like a dagger to the chest. I'd given her the world, and this was her gratitude. And with Marco, of all people, my cousin, someone I'd grown up with, trusted, treated like a brother. Bro. But it wasn't just Marco. There were others. Flirtatious exchanges with strangers whose names I didn't recognize, messages confirming rendezvous at upscale hotels I'd never been to. Christina's hunger for excitement extended far beyond what I could have imagined. That night, I sat in my office. In front of me lay a folder filled with evidence, messages, photos, every damning lie Christina thought she'd hidden so well. For a moment, I let myself feel the weight of it all, the years I'd wasted, the love I'd poured into someone who never truly deserved it. I exhaled slowly and deliberately, then slid the folder into the safe. Not yet. Confronting her now would be satisfying. Oh, it would feel good to see her squirm, but it wouldn't be enough. I needed precision, strategy. I needed to dismantle her life the way she tried to dismantle mine, carefully, deliberately, and with no room for recovery, I began to act. Just as I was closing the safe, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was Charles, my oldest friend. He wanted me to come to dinner. My first instinct was to decline. After all, what was the point? For so long, I'd wrapped myself in a cocoon of work, home, and Christina, shutting out everything and everyone else. But something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the faint whisper of a life I used to have, one filled with people who genuinely cared about me. Over the next few weeks, I moved methodically. I met with my lawyer, transferring assets out of our shared accounts, and ensuring Christina's access to my world was slowly but steadily cut off. She hadn't noticed yet, too preoccupied with her endless girls' nights and frivolous shopping sprees. Each small step felt like a victory. When the joint credit card declined for the first time, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. That evening, Christina stormed into the penthouse, feigning confusion. "Gabriel, there must be some mistake," she said, waving the card in my face. "I'll look into it," I replied, keeping my tone calm, almost disinterested. She didn't press further, too proud to admit the humiliation. But it wasn't about the money for me. It was about breaking her trust in everything I gave her. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Then I started to clean things up with Marco first, since this trustworthy guy left me no choice. His smug demeanor, his constant hovering around Christina, and the subtle way he always steered conversations back to his business. It was all too calculated. When I finally pieced it together, I decided to confront him directly. No theatrics, no warning, just the truth, raw and unvarnished. I called him to my office one evening. He walked in, all false confidence and casual arrogance. "What's up, cousin?" he said, easing into the chair across from me like we were just catching up over coffee. "Hey, bro, I didn't waste time. Cut the act, Marco. I know what you've been doing." He froze for half a second, just long enough for me to see the flicker of guilt in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "You and Christina," I said, leaning forward. "The late-night chats, the secret meetings, the way you've been using her to push your business agenda. Do you think I'm blind?" Marco smirked, a defense mechanism I'd seen him use 100 times. "Come on, Gabriel, you're reading too much into this. Christina's just been supportive of my work. She knows how much I've been struggling to get investors." "And she thought you might—" "Ibrahim, she thought I might what?" I interrupted, my voice like ice. "Invest in your scam because she asked me to? Because she warmed me up to the idea while you were what? Sharing secrets? Sharing more?" Marco's smirk disappeared, replaced by a forced calm. "You're making it sound like—" "Don't insult me by playing dumb, Marco," I snapped. "You've been working this angle for months, using my wife, to line your pockets. What kind of man does that to his own family?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "You're overreacting," he said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Christina and we've just been talking, Gabriel. That's it, talking. ABC. Then why does she have your name saved in her phone under a code? Why do I have messages from her saying she'll make sure I see the value in your garbage startup?" Marco's face flushed, his composure cracking. "Look, I didn't mean for this to—" "You didn't mean for this to what?" I demanded, standing now, my fists clenched at my sides. "To blow up in your face? To get caught? You think I don't know what kind of man you are? You think I don't see how you've been manipulating her and trying to manipulate me?" He stood too, trying to save face. "You've got it all wrong, Gabriel," he said, his voice rising. "Christina came to me. She's the one who—" "Hey, Brie, don't you dare try to blame her," I said, cutting him off. "She's guilty, yes, but your family. You knew exactly what you were doing and you did it anyway." For a moment we stared at each other, the air between us heavy with years of shared history, now shattered by betrayal. "You're going to regret this," he said, his tone laced with a hollow threat. "No, Marco," I replied coldly. "The only one who's going to regret this is you, and by the time I'm done, there won't be a single person willing to touch your business or your name." Marco stormed out, slamming the door behind him, but his anger didn't faze me. If anything, it only fueled my resolve. I knew the next confrontation would be even harder, but I wasn't going to back down. Christina had to face the truth next, and this time there was no escaping it. Now, for Christina, she had built a web of lies, and I wasn't about to walk into it blindly. I needed to think this through. If she thought I was going to crumble, she was wrong. I had one advantage she didn't realize. I'd been planning for this moment long before it even happened. The annulment papers sat in my office safe, untouched, since the day I signed them nearly a decade earlier. I'd had them drawn up during our honeymoon in La Romana, back when I was still in the honeymoon phase, literally and figuratively. It wasn't because I didn't trust Christina back then. It was because I knew the risks of being a man in my position. Wealth attracts people, and not all of them have pure intentions. I told myself the annulment was a worst-case scenario I'd never have to use. But now, it felt like my saving grace. Broke? Guess what? Little did Christina know that we weren't legally married. She thought she'd secured herself a lifelong claim to everything I owned. That was her first mistake. I'd waited for the perfect moment, quiet, private, where she couldn't run or deflect. Dinner in the penthouse was just the opportunity I needed. I set the table myself and pretended to be the man she thought she could still manipulate. But underneath it all, I was calm, calculating. Every word I said, every look I gave was part of the plan. Christina thought she held the cards. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Christina looked stunning as always, her makeup flawless, her smile radiant. She had no idea what was coming. "I ran into Marco today," I said casually, cutting into my steak. Her fork paused midair. "Oh, how's he doing?" she asked. "Fine. He mentioned you," I said, locking eyes with her. "Said you two have been spending some time together." She forced a laugh. "Oh, come on, Gabriel. Marco and I, don't be ridiculous." "He's family." "Exactly," I said, my voice cold. "Which is why I find it disgusting." Ibri, her smile faded completely. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. "I know, Christina. I know about Marco. I know about the others. Don't play dumb. I've seen the messages." Her face turned pale, and for the first time, she was at a loss for words. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Save it," I shouted, my voice rising. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I haven't noticed the late nights, the lies, the way you act around him? You've been using me, Christina. All this time I've been nothing but a paycheck to you." She tried to deny it, but her voice cracked, and tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered, finally dropping the act. "I didn't mean for it to happen." A predictable display of crocodile tears. You didn't mean for it to happen? I laughed bitterly. So, what did you mean to happen? To bleed me dry until you found your next victim? Her silence spoke volumes. She knew she'd been caught, and there was no way out, but instead of apologizing, she turned defensive. You're not perfect, Gabriel. You're boring, predictable. Do you know how it feels to be married to someone who cares more about work than me? Her words stung, but I didn't let them show. I cared about you more than anything. I offered you everything you'd ever dreamed about, I said coldly. And you threw it all away. I hope Marco was worth it because you'll be leaving this marriage with nothing. She looked confused, her tears stopping for a moment. What do you mean? She asked. I smiled then, a small, cruel smile. I mean, we were never married, Christina. Legally, anyway. I annulled the marriage 4 months after our wedding, so technically you've been nothing more than a very expensive girlfriend. Her face crumpled as the weight of my words sank in. You're lying, she whispered, shaking her head. Am I? I said, pulling the annulment papers from my briefcase and sliding them across the table. See for yourself. She was absolutely shocked. How did this happen? When? She asked. Remember La Romana? I asked, my voice cold and deliberate. While you were sipping cocktails and enjoying yourself like a fool, you were already divorced and didn't even know it. She grabbed the papers with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the text. When she looked back at me, her expression was a mix of shock, anger, and despair. You bastard, she spat. No, Christina, I said, standing up. That's you, and now we're done. Brooke, I walked out, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. The war wasn't over yet. The fallout of her betrayal was just beginning. Christina's screams echoed in the penthouse as I closed the door behind me. I didn't care. For the first time in a decade, the weight of her presence was gone, and I felt strangely calm. I had no idea where to go. My home, my sanctuary, had been tainted by her deceit. So, I decided to go to the one place where clarity had always found me, the office. Uproo, the next morning, my lawyer called. Gabriel, are you sure you want to do this publicly? He asked, his voice cautious. We can keep it quiet, settle everything behind closed doors. No, I said firmly. She doesn't deserve quiet. I want her to feel the consequences, and consequences she felt. The annulment papers were just the beginning. I removed her name from everything, cars, properties, even the shared memberships to exclusive clubs. By the end of the day, Christina's life had gone from penthouses and private jets to 4 suitcases and a guest room at her friend's apartment. Within days, she was calling me incessantly, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to outright threats. You can't do this to me, Gabriel, she sobbed in one message. I gave you the best years of my life. I loved you. I laughed bitterly, deleting the voicemail. The best years of her life, maybe, but she'd spent those years siphoning everything she could from me while chasing her thrills behind my back. Love didn't even enter the equation. What, was she waiting for me to die and live happily ever after with my cousin using my money? Huh? The more desperate she became, the more I realized how much power I had taken back. But the fallout wasn't just financial. Christina's betrayal had cracked open my personal life in a way I hadn't anticipated. Friends and acquaintances began whispering. Some pitied me, while others saw an opportunity to get closer now that she was gone. It was exhausting sorting out who genuinely cared and who was just curious about the scandal. I thought, to get through this, I had to make things clear to everyone. So, the first step in moving forward was confronting the ties I had yet to sever. Despite the annulment, there were still lingering threads, shared acquaintances, unresolved financial entanglements, and the looming question of Marco. Christina might have been legally powerless, but socially, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative. I decided it was time to put an end to that. I started by calling a family meeting, including my kids, something I rarely did. My family had always been complicated, tight-knit but riddled with its own politics. Marco, however, had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. When everyone gathered at my home in the Hamptons, the tension was palpable. Marco arrived late, his usual bravado noticeably absent. He avoided my gaze as I stood at the head of the room, addressing the family. I've called you all here because there's been a betrayal, I began, my voice steady. One that involves not just my personal life but the integrity of this family. The room fell silent. I laid out the facts: Christina's infidelity, Marco's involvement, the evidence I'd uncovered. Gasps rippled through the group as I showed screenshots of the messages, cold, hard proof of their deception. Marco tried to interject, but I silenced him with a glare. You've not only betrayed me, I said, my voice firm, but you've brought shame to this family. Effective immediately, you are no longer welcome in my life, my home, or my business. Consider this your formal exile. The room was stunned. Marco stammered, trying to defend himself, but the damage was done. One by one, family members turned their backs on him, disgusted by his actions. By the time the meeting ended, Marco was effectively cut off from the family, just as I had planned.